If you want to learn how to play on Mars, have fun, and shave some time off the typical learning curve, then let's get ready to build our colony on the red planet. I split this how to play up into two videos. The first is this Start Here video, where we look at setup and a thorough overview, and then the second video focuses on actions. I'll put the link to all the other On Mars videos in the description, as well as at the end of this video as soon as they're released. So, On Mars puts you in the role of a chief astronaut of a private construction enterprise, and you're helping to expand and improve the Mars colony. You'll be competing with other players to see who contributes to this colony in the most impactful way. You'll do things like build bigger and better buildings, of course, in a balanced, self-sufficient way. You'll do things like grow the colony's population and perform contracts. All of these things and more are measured with opportunity points referred to in this game as OP. And whoever finishes the game with the most OP wins. Alright, so let's get this one set up. In this video, we're going to focus on the 3 to 4 player game, but if you're interested in the 2-player game, there are just a couple differences noted on the last page of the rulebook that you'll want to make sure to understand. Also on this last page is a first colonist variant. This is a variant you may want to use for your first game. It gives you preset mission cards, it provides tiles that show you where to start your player markers in the turn order spaces, and then gives you some first colonist cards that give you objectives to obtain. So to start setup, let's set your board in the middle of the table somewhere. Next, find all your discovery tiles, shuffle these and put them into 2 piles and stick them at the top of the board here. And then you're going to flip the top 2 tiles up and they go on these 2 discovery tile places. Next, we move down to this area of the board called the warehouse. Place 3 of each resource shown in these spaces. And then crystals, not tiles, go in these 3 spaces. Next we move to this area of the board, and it's called our tech grid or tech tile grid. Find your starting 4 shelter tech tiles, matching each player color, and then put these aside. For ease of setup for future games, I recommend taking these shelter starting tech tiles and putting them down in this little groove here, below your starting shelter tiles. Ooh. Next, sort all the remaining tech tiles into 2 different color piles. Shuffle each one of these piles, and then take one of these piles and lay them out. Each set of tech tiles is the same as the other color, so it doesn't matter which is used to start the game. This other pile of tech tiles gets used later in the game. Sort out and shuffle your level 1 blueprint cards and your level 3 blueprint cards into 2 piles. Then place the level 1 blueprint cards on top of level 3. Then draw and place the top 6 blueprint cards near the left side of the board to create your blueprint display. Slide your Scientist/Earth Contract display board up next to the right side of your board. Then find your Scientist cards. Place a Scientist in the display so this icon matches this icon. So the first space is going to be your Geologist. The second space is your R&D Engineer. The third space is your Hydrologist. The fourth space is your Biochemist. The fifth space is your Geochemist. And the last space is your Systems Engineer. Find your matching scientists and place the matching scientist on the card. Next, find your Earth contract cards that look like this and place them right here next to your scientists. These cards don't need to be shuffled or sorted, and you'll see why when we cover this action in gameplay. Next, find your starting mine tile and place this in this spot in the center of the board. Position it so the icon for minerals is at the bottom of this tile. Find your starting building tiles that look like this, there's 4 of them, and randomly place these face down in these 4 blue outlined hexes. The notch of these tiles is aligned toward the bottom. Fill each spot in this building display with the color matching the color as seen down here. So white, blue, green, gray, and this is that dark gray for the mines. And each of those piles gets shuffled. Find your research tiles here, and you'll notice that each research tile is marked with a small letter at the bottom as seen here. There's letters A, B, C, and D. Place the tiles with the letter A up by this letter A here. Tiles with the letter B go up in this corner by the big red letter B, and you kind of get the picture here. And then even though there's not a D in this corner, letter D goes over here. Sort out your mission cards that look like this into two piles. There's this one with the full red circle, which is your full missions, and the one with this half red circle, which is your short missions. And then shuffle each pile. If you're playing the short game, you draw 2 short missions and 1 long mission. If you're playing a longer game, you draw 2 long missions and 1 short mission. We're going to set up for the short game. So we draw 2 short missions, and your mission cards go in these 3 spaces. And it really doesn't matter which space these cards go into, and you'll see why as we start playing the game. So we draw our 2 short missions, and then our 1 long mission. Put the rest of those mission cards back in the box. Next, find these happy little red cubes. The big cube is your remaining mission marker, and the small ones are your mission tracker cubes. Take your remaining mission marker, and it gets placed over here in space number 3 on this remaining missions track. Then take your mission tracker cubes, and one of these gets placed on each track by each mission card. The position for the mission tracker cube depends on how many players you're playing with. We're setting up for the 3-player game, so it's going to get placed in position 4. If you were playing the 2-player game, this would get put in position 3, the 4-player game, position 5. And we do this for each card. And then create the supply for your resource tiles, and then your crystals. Find your colony marker and your LSS tracker markers. Take your colony marker, and that goes over to this section and goes in space number 2. Take your LSS tracker markers and place the marker matching the symbol down here at the bottom in row number 1. Next, find your LSS reward tiles and shuffle all of these, and then place the top 4 in these 4 spaces. The rest of these won't get used and get placed back in the box. Place 1 shelter in each of these 4 spaces. And then take your starting shelter tile, and you'll place them on the board as follows. For a 2-player game, you would use this one and this one since they have the 2 dots. For a 3-player game, which is what we're playing, you'd use these 3 spaces. And then for a 4-player game with the 4 dots, use these 4 spaces. The recommendation is that your starting shelter just gets placed closest to your player board. And then we'll flip up all of these starting tiles. And lastly, each player places a bot on their starting shelter tile. Find 3 of your colonists matching your player color, and place 1 in each of these 3 spaces on your player board. Find the rest of your bots. You'll have 1 rover, the rest of your colonists, and your advanced buildings. Those can all get set next to your player board, but I'll keep these off camera for our game to allow for a bit more space on my smallish table. Find these 5 progress cubes matching your player color, and place 1 in each of these 5 spots at the bottom of your player board. Find your private goal cards and shuffle these, and then deal 3 to each player. Each player can look at their cards, but keep them private from other players. Put the rest of these private goal cards back in the box. Find your player marker and your OP marker. Put your player marker on your board for now, and then each player places their OP marker on the 0 space here of the starting track. Each player places 1 resource of the matching type in the storage area of their player board. And then each player places 1 crystal in this depot area. Then if you remember the shelter tech tile that we sorted out earlier, it goes in this space in what's called your laboratory. Find your 5 ships that look like this, and place 1 in each of these 5 spaces on your player board. Then each player takes one of these quick reference cards and places it by their player board. I'm going to keep these off the table for our video, but I highly recommend using them. They come in really handy during a game. Yeah! Before we finish the last couple steps of setup, let's look at the big picture of how this game works, along with an overview of the board. On Mars is played over a series of rounds. Each round is made up of 2 phases. The The first phase is the colonization phase, and the second phase is the shuttle phase. During the colonization phase, players take turns in ascending order as noted by the number of their turn order space their player marker occupies. They must take one main action from the orbital station actions on the left side of the board when their player marker is in one of the orbital station spaces. Or they take one action from the colony actions on the right side of the board if their player marker is in one of the colony spaces. Optionally, each player can take one executive action either before or after they take their main action. There are 3 executive actions available at the beginning of the game as shown in these spaces of your player board, and many of them require crystals to use. When a player completes their turn in the colonization phase, they lay their player marker down so no one forgets whose turn it is. Once all players have taken their turns, the shuttle phase begins. The shuttle phase is where players many times will have the option to move from the orbital station to the colony, or from the colony to the orbital station. When the shuttle is in one of these red spaces, it travels. So in this position, it would travel from the colony to the orbital station, and in this position it would travel from the orbital station to the colony. Only player markers on the same side as the shuttle can choose to hitch a ride on the shuttle. When traveling, players also get some other benefits that we'll look at in detail when we look at this phase of the game. And once the shuttle phase is over, the round ends. Rounds will continue until the end of the game is triggered, and this happens when the remaining missions marker has reached the end of its track. This marker moves when a player either completes a mission or when the colony progresses to a high level. I'll explain more on this in a minute. After the end of the game is triggered, then players play one more round minus the last shuttle phase, and then opportunity points, aka OP, are calculated, and the player with the most OP is the winner. Anything that earns OP in the game can easily be identified with this icon. If the icon stands alone and you fulfill the requirements to get those points, move your OP marker along the track around the perimeter of the board. If the icon has this arrow pointing to a line, then the OP for that area will be totaled at the end of the game. For example, this icon on your player board means that each ship in your hangar at the end of the game earns you 3 OP. Before we start looking at gameplay in detail, I want to give you an overview of the board. Let's start with these 2 icons on the top of the board. This icon on the top left refers to the orbital station side of the board, and the icon on the top right refers to the colony side of the board. Anytime you see these icons in the game, they refer to the orbital station and the colony. The LSS or Life Support System area of the board provides an overview of what buildings are needed for the colony to grow. On the left of this display is the colony marker. One thing interesting about this is the row below the colony marker is the current colony level. So that's why this marker starts in the second row, if you were wondering. Then there's 4 building markers on the right, which move each time a building of that type is built. These all start in space 1 since the game starts with 1 building of each of these types already on the board. In order for the colony level marker to advance, all of the building markers need to be at the same level or above the colony level marker. When this happens, the colony level marker advances 1 space up on the track, and then the tech tiles get refilled, the warehouse gets refilled, along with other things found on the last page of the reference book that we'll look at more in detail later. The icons on this new space indicate that the progress area of the board is scored for this new level, as noted by the icon matching the one in the progress area. We'll talk about this area next, and now this icon means that now during the shuttle phase, the shuttle will now move to space 2 instead of the red space 1. So you'll see that building buildings is advantageous to gain OP, but when you build what's called a building complex, you have even more possibility for OP. We'll talk a lot more about building complexes when we look at the construction action. But for now, just remember that a building complex refers to two or more of the same type of building tiles adjacent to each other. For instance, these two adjacent generators would be considered a building complex of two tiles. The first time you either create or increase the size of a building complex, you take your progress cube from below the matching building on your player board and place it on your player color below the matching building in the progress area. When the colony marker advances to level 2, level 3, and then at the end of the game, this progress area is scored. You score 1 OP if you have 1 cube in this area, 2 OP for 2 cubes, 4 for 3, 7 for 4, and 11 for 5. So there's lots of OP available throughout the game in this area. By the way, there will be this red line through this icon to remind you when not to score this area as well. When the colony marker moves to level 3, the revealed icon shows that the remaining mission marker moves 1 space. This is one thing that can move this marker. However, when any of the 3 available missions are completed, this marker moves as well. So as players take action or gain benefits through other means throughout the game, they can contribute to these missions. So one thing that's easier to explain now versus during setup are these little mission reminders. And so they give us these reminders to put next to an action to remind you that when you complete that action, you may have the possibility to contribute to one of these 3 missions. So we take the reminder for A, and to contribute to this mission, you would add a new bot to the board. And so that can happen with this action over here, which is to move a ship from your depot to your hangar. And we'll see how that works when we look at this action in the next video. For B, that can happen when you acquire one of these scientists over here, so we put that next to the relevant acquire scientist action. And C, this one's a little more ambiguous, not sure if it's right or wrong. You contribute to mission C when you pick up one of these research tiles. One of the ways you do that is from this action where you can move your rover. As an example, if a player performed the acquire scientist action and takes a scientist, they would contribute to this mission over here, and then they would move this mission marker 1 space lower. When this cube reaches the checkmark space, the mission is completed and the remaining mission marker moves 1 space to the right, and the mission card is removed from the game. It's not only actions that contribute to missions. If you were to gain a scientist with another ability without taking the action, you would also contribute to this mission. Again, when the remaining mission marker reaches the end of its track, due to either all 3 missions being completed or a combination of missions being complete or the colony level advancing to 3 or 4, the end of the game is triggered. Again, when this happens, players finish their current round and then play one more round, skipping the final shuttle phase. Then they move on to final scoring. Players follow this track at the bottom of the board. This track helps remind you of all the scoring steps. And we'll look at this in detail after we cover actions in the next video. By the way, if you play a game where the colony marker actually advances to level 5, the end of the game is triggered regardless of the space of the remaining missions marker. Your player board is made up of several regions. This first region is called your living quarters. You start out with 3 colonists in your living quarters, and you have room for 1 more. As you build these shelters, you'll reveal 2 more spaces for colonists. You build shelters in ascending order. And for an example of scoring, let's say I had all these colonists in my living quarters at the end of the game, I would score OP for this tile because I have 1 colonist here and all the others are full. If I had this space full and I had a colonist here, then I would score OP for this space. To the left of your living quarters is your working area. Many times during the game, you'll be asked to take a colonist and place them in your working area. Down on the bottom, this area is known as your storage area. You can only hold as many resources as the number of shelters you have on the board plus 1. So at the beginning of the game, we have one shelter, our starting shelter on the board, so we can hold a maximum of 2 of any resource. Up in this area is your laboratory. Your laboratory is made up of several levels, as seen by this number at the top. Your tech tiles, as you get them, start in level 1, and then they'll advance through your tech grid and become a little more valuable and more powerful as they advance. The number of OP these score at the end of the game is listed at the bottom. So a tech tile in this column would score 5 OP at the end of the game. Your depot is over on the left side of your board. We have 5 ships, and we have space for 3 crystals. As you acquire new crystals throughout the game, they're put in this little holding area down below, and at the beginning of your turn, they get moved up here. You can only hold 3 at the beginning of the game, so if you have more than that, they'll have to go in the supply. On the right side of your depot are your executive actions. These are the 3 that you start with at the beginning of the game, and their cost is located on the left side of these, and it's in crystals or a scientist for this bottom one. Over here is your hangar. In order to use your ships, they have to move over to your hangar, and there's an action that does that we'll look at in the next video. So to make this a bit more realistic, I named our players where purple is Alex, yellow is Harper, and then green is Maria. So according to the rules, the player who's seen the movie The Martian the most gets to choose their first starting turn order space. And the turn order space determines initiative, as we'll see when we start taking actions in the colonization phase. So Alex says he's watched the movie The Martian the most because he puts it on every night before he goes to bed to soothe him to sleep. And he's been doing this for about a year, so he's watched it about 350 times.
What?
He selects turn order space number 2, and he gets the benefit on this space. To see what these spaces do, you look at page 2 of the reference guide, and right here it says take 1 crystal or 1 resource from the warehouse. So Alex takes a crystal from the warehouse and adds this to the area below the depot on his player board. Now if we go in clockwise order, next is Maria gets to select her starting turn order space. And she selects space number 6, which is also a resupply action, as we saw in page 2 of the reference guide. She takes a water resource and adds this to her player board. Harper selects space number 4, and that's where you get to add 1 colonist from your supply to your living quarters. But to receive this benefit, you have to pay either a water or a plant resource. So Harper pays with a water by taking a water from her storage and placing it in the supply. Then she adds 1 colonist to this empty space in her living quarters. The player in the highest numbered turn order space gets to select the starting red space where the shuttle starts the game. Maria wants it to start over here, and she's got some logic behind that. And now we're ready for Alex to take the first turn of the game. You'll see this play out along with a detailed explanation of each action in the next video. I'll put this link here on the end screen and then in the description as soon as it's released. Also, if you're interested in any of the other Modern Cardboard on Mars videos, you can check that out by clicking the playlist link here, and that link is also in the description, and I'll put it out again as soon as it's released. So we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.